Listed as one of the women-hating slashers of the early 80s by Siskel and Ebert in their 1980 sneak preview special, Women in Danger, Don't Go in the House is a brutal film about a deranged woman killer with a fire obsession named Donnie. While many of the deaths in Don't Go in the House take place off-screen, the death of Donnie's first victim, Cathys, holds many of the unsavory stereotypes often connected to slasher deaths, mainly the intermingling of brutality, women's terror, and female nudity. In 1992, Fred Moultier and Barry Spolsky released a content study of 30 slasher films released in the 1980s. While their study found that women in slashers were not significantly more likely to be victims than male characters, like many people at the time assumed, they did find that women victims were shown in terror for longer amounts of screen time than their male counterparts. Cathys' victimization is drawn out not from a desperate attempt to escape the killer, but from her struggle to escape her bonds to her prolonged screams of pain when set on fire. This is different from many other slasher films where the chase is when we see a victim's terror concluded by a relatively short death. Additionally, Cathys is stripped naked for her death when there's no reason for her to be. We often see this in other horror films. A woman victim is shown in various states of undress or sexual vulnerability during her death, even when male victims facing the same type of death are not. In the climax of the film, Donnie sets a priest, Father Garrity, on fire, and while we do hear his screams of terror, the audience is not shown the same up-close vulnerability in his burning that we see in Cathys. While many well-known slasher films focus their narratives more on the victim than the killer, preferring to relay the backstory and characterization of the killer through other characters in an urban legend-like fashion, Don't Go in the House is all about getting to know its killer. Donnie picks up his first victim when he goes into a flower shop under the guise of buying flowers for his mother. After helping Donnie get his flowers, Cathys misses her bus. On the sidewalk near the bus stop, there is a group of drunken young men who begin to catcall her. Donnie drives up to offer her a ride to the next bus stop. In that moment, she is faced with the decision of walking by herself near a group of openly hostile men or taking a ride from a seemingly innocuous Donnie who spends his free time buying flowers for his sick mother. Donnie appears to be the obvious safe choice, but as many of us now know thanks to the rising acceptance of an informal yet widely experienced phenomenon called nice guy syndrome, men who portray themselves as the most docile can be the most dangerous. On the surface, Donnie's struggle throughout the film appears to be a fight between sanity and insanity as he moves between mood swings and hearing voices to attempts to participate in normal society. But his true struggle is one of power. Bullied by his mother and emasculated by his boss, Donnie lacks power, and his targeting of women is his attempt to gain power. This is most recognizable when Donnie picks up two drunk women to murder right after being beat up by a guy at a nightclub. He is emasculated by the beating and must immediately find new victims to reclaim his masculinity. Donnie's true view of the world is best seen when he speaks to the corpses of his victims, which he keeps dressed up in one of the rooms of his house. Some of the things he says to them are, "You're all bitches, selfish and vain. I won't stand for impotence from any of you. I tried being nice and every one of you took advantage. Now you're going to have to pay the price. A lot of thanks I get. I give you love and shelter better than any of you ever had, and you turn on me, but I still let you stay." While Donnie did not spend time getting to know the personality of these women, he sees them uniformly as bad. Additionally, he sees himself as their victims, believing that they have all mistreated him in some way. This worldview mirrors rhetoric found in radically misogynistic communities many of us have found online. Donnie's struggle with power began with his abusive mother, who would punish him as a kid by holding his arms over a fire. Monstrous motherhood can be found in a variety of horror movies, and the sons of monstrous mothers often become monsters themselves. Their actions are blamed on the character flaws of their mothers rather than their own character. Mothers become the scapegoat for men's actions, and by extension, women are the source of bad in the world. Several times the film draws connections between the actions of Donnie's mother and his actions by intercutting childhood flashbacks with his current abuse of women. During one of his hunts for a victim, Donnie passes by a mother scolding her young son, serving as a subtle reminder that it is bad mothers who are numerous and unrestricted that are the problem, even in the midst of Donnie's murder spree. Don't Go in the House ends with a new boy hearing the same voices that plagued Donnie throughout the film, after being hit by his mother. This cyclical ending is similar to that of another slasher mentioned in Women in Danger. In the 1980 film He Knows You're Alone, the killer's backstory is that he killed his ex-fiancée on her wedding night for leaving him. At the end of the film, the would-be final girl has survived this original killer only to be murdered on her wedding day by her ex-fiancé for marrying someone else. The cycle these films set up is one that frames men's violent actions as reactions to what women have done wrong. Despite its less than progressive views towards women, Don't Go in the House features a surprisingly enlightening take on male friendship. Throughout the movie, Donnie's co-worker Bobby continues to pop up. Bobby is a beer-loving, sports-watching, womanizing man. He cheats on his wife, sexualizes women, and refuses to help with childcare or housework. And yet, he continuously attempts to support Donnie emotionally. It all begins when one of their coworkers is set on fire in the opening scene. Donnie is near this coworker during the incident but fails to help him. After this traumatic work accident, Bobby follows Donnie out of their workplace to ask if he is okay. Bobby invites Donnie for a beer. When Donnie declines, Bobby explains that he just wanted to make sure that Donnie knows that the coworker's injuries were not Donnie's fault, because it is normal to freeze up in a situation like that. Bobby doesn't push a toxic narrative that men must take action or that men who allow their emotions to take control are weak. When Donnie vents about their boss emasculating him after the incident, Bobby allows him to complain and acknowledges the boss's cruel words instead of telling Donnie to suck it up. After a few more attempts to get Donnie to come to the bar with him, Bobby gracefully accepts that he is not coming, without joking or chastising Donnie for not doing the manly thing of drinking his feelings. The next day, Bobby calls Donnie to ask him how he's doing because he is worried Donnie is still upset. Bobby asks him if he wants to meet for a cup of coffee before work. When Donnie questions his motives, Bobby responds that he thought Donnie would want to talk about what happened yesterday. Once again, Bobby is acknowledging the importance of men having a safe place to discuss their emotions. This isn't the only time that Bobby calls Donnie. Later in the film, Bobby calls him from a bar. Bobby has already established in the earlier scene with Donnie that his bar time is an important ritual in his daily life, and by calling Donnie, he demonstrates that he wants Donnie to be included in the safe place he has created for himself. In this phone call, Donnie reveals that he is in trouble and scared. Bobby does not ridicule him for his fear. Instead, he once again asks Donnie if he wants to talk.
Not only that, but he offers to leave his safe space in the bar to come to Donnie's home. He is willing to leave his comfort to enter the unknown in his determination to be there for Donnie.
For a man who exhibits many macho men stereotypes in his character, Bobby refuses to be the strong, silent type, instead opting for understanding and communication. It is later proven that Bobby truly cares about Donnie's well-being after Donnie ruins the girl-filled club night that Bobby had spent weeks setting up for himself. Bobby still attempts to get help for Donnie, leading to the climax of the film. Bobby's continuous pushes to connect with Donnie socially and emotionally really stand out throughout the film, not only because they seem at odds with the film's brutal attitude towards many of its characters, but because horror films are often about isolation. But here we have a character who refuses to let Donnie be isolated despite his obvious flaws. Perhaps if he could have gotten over his obsession with restoring power to himself, Donnie could have lived a normal life with support from his best friend Bobby.